My dad and mother had 7 children. And the oldest was Hugh, and the youngest was John, and there was 20 years between the two of them. And in those days, families would have breakfast together, and then everybody would go home for lunch, and they'd have a meal together. And then in the evening, family would eat together again. And in our family, this was the time of devotions. And at all 3 meals, we prayed before the meal, and we read a Bible. We read the Bible together after each meal, and we prayed again after each meal. And there was discussion of what we read in the Bible. This was Bible study 3 times every day as a family. And so sitting around that table, there was an interesting combination of being in Bible class and of studying manners and of learning how to talk with each other and of a lot of infighting. You know?
How would you describe, Max, the qualities and principles of the Herman Miller culture that make it a special place? What should people know about the Herman Miller culture that your father, your brother Hugh, and you all sought to create?
Your connections are important, and your relationships are fundamental. Relationships are always more fundamental than technology. You know, we do need technology, but we don't reach our potential unless our relationships are of a certain quality. And so you work your way back through relationships. Well, why would you have good relationships? Well, because your values dictate to you that you ought to have good relationships. Well, where do those values come from? Well, the values come from certain beliefs. Your beliefs always precede behavior. Well, then where do you get your beliefs? Well, now you come back to how really do you believe certain things about the way the world is? Do you have any convictions about where everything started? And so I think you can work your way back, and then you start with whether or not there's a God, and whether or not the words he left us were truly inspired, whether we can count on them, and whether or not there's any truth to the existence of Jesus as a part of the Godhead, and whether or not there's any truth, to the Bible says over 500 people saw Jesus alive after he was dead. And so if you accept this particular pattern of thought about faith, and I'm not saying everybody has to, but if you do, what kind of encumbrances do you now live with? And so I think we start with a certain theology. We start with a God. It becomes a theology. It becomes a set of values. It becomes a kind of a behavior, which produces a kind of a relationship, which produces a kind of a service or a product.